Nature is a complicated organism, and at times she's very difficult to understand, but she always operates with space and time as fundamental functioning mechanisms. And as such, because we can separate those two into two separate ideas, we can also split up and conceptualize causality in two different ways. So one way, temporal causality, is the standard addition cause and effect that we all know that's really simple to understand. Anytime you just play pool or anytime you observe cause and effect, you're seeing the temporal version or the version that's bound in time, causality. So it's basically the arrow of time. But there's another sort of causality, and that's the one I wanted to address today, which is kind of a spatial causality because it runs perpendicular to temporal causality. Philosophers call this downward causation, and it gets mixed up with another concept called supervenience. Consider how you yourself are a single autopoietic system that is a self-sustaining, self-creating, confined, somewhat closed system, and you are a highly complex expression of energy, and you have a multiplicity of hierarchical orders that exist in you that are all operating at once to give rise to your conscious awareness or your experience. Supervenience looks at the higher level properties of the system that you are and sees how they're determined by the lower level properties. So let's consider ourselves and go in and down to see all of this different hierarchical orders or levels of complexity that exist within us that are functioning perpendicular to the arrow of time from the bottom up to give rise to consciousness. Or actually, downward causation, more specifically, is going from the top down. So let's start from the top down. And in my model of downward causation, consciousness is the ceiling. It's irreducible, transcendentally, and existentially primary. And I know the universe exists without regards to my being here. Nevertheless, consciousness is the ceiling in my view because only under its umbrella is anything and everything known. Regardless if the universe is there or not, doesn't matter. But consciousness for me is the ceiling, and underneath that we find everything else. So the first step in going in and down with regards to downward causation, from the level of consciousness, the first thing we meet with is mind, or all things psychology, mental states and mental properties, and the feeling of pain, and anything that's just mental in nature. And I should point out here that when I mean consciousness, I'm saying awareness of. So consciousness can be aware of mental states as well as being aware of physical states. So that's why for me consciousness is the ceiling, or because it has that irreducible primacy. So that's the first layer down in downward causation. We go in and down. From consciousness we first reach psychology, and then here's where we meet the hard problem of consciousness, because from psychology, the next level down, or hierarchical order of complexity, is the biological system itself, or the body. Now the body is a complex system of systems within systems, and all of our organs and different cells and all of this all conglomerate and get together to produce consciousness. Now we know that neurons in the brain fire in these incredibly complex, nearly incomprehensible algorithmic circuits, and they're all firing, and we know that their firing is what brings about or produces consciousness, and yet we still don't know how it produces consciousness because all of that knowledge and information coming to us from neuroscience still doesn't answer the hard problem of consciousness, because consciousness is not neuron firings. Even though we know that neuron firings has something to do with bringing about consciousness, there's still a hard problem there. There's still a connection. There's a necessary connection we know is there, but we don't know how it does it, because consciousness is that much different than physical descriptions. But here we can go deeper into ourselves and note that the neuron itself is made up of smaller things. It itself is a single cell and has other parts like dendrites and a dendrite and an axon. But the neuron itself is made up of smaller pieces, which we all know as molecules. And further, those molecules are made up of atoms. And already when we meet the atom, we've discovered our first fundamental rock bottom subatomic particle called the electron. And the electron as a matter wave is responsible for the entire domain of chemistry. So far we've gone from consciousness to psychology to biology to chemistry and down into nuclear physics. We're moving to nuclear physics. Now, when we get down to this level, we reach another difficult or another hard problem, and this is called quantum decoherence. Quantum decoherence is trying to tell us about the difference between a classical system and a quantum system. Because in a quantum system, waves of energy are spread out in their fields, and they are in what's called a superposition, and they haven't collapsed into one settled state. So there's a difference here between a classical state. The classical state knows where the particle is, and I don't like using particle language, but in the classical state, you know where the particle is and its momentum, and you know everything. But in the quantum state, it's in a superposition, and all you can do is calculate probabilities. So there's another weird level here that's sort of analogous to the hard problem of consciousness, but it's down at the bottom floor, and it's called quantum decoherence. And here we reach where we have good solid classical knowledge of the workings of what atoms are doing, and then you move one step lower and we reach quantum field theory, where everything is just energy momentum fluctuating in between these fields and responding to charges, and it gets a little bit, I don't know, what do you want to call it, fluid-like, maybe field-like in the sense that consciousness is. Now, I should say, when we get down to this level, this quantum field fabric of buzzing, weird, everywhere energy fluctuating in fields, this is a level of the fabric of existence that which we are. We can claim to be this because we know that we just went all the way down, and we know all of these things exist to bring about or produce our consciousness that's on the top. But we are all the way down, and it's not even turtles all the way down because it's not infinite regress, but we are all the way down. We are the very fabric of existence itself. Now, is the quantum field theory the rock bottom fabric of the universe? I don't know. Maybe not. There's string theory. I don't know much about string theory, but string theory, or bosonic string theory, postulates that there's 26 multiple dimensions down there. And standard string theory, I think, counts 11 dimensions, and gravitational string theory 10. So, and that can be below quantum field theory, but still, regardless, quantum field theory is a level, and we actually know way more about quantum field theory than we do about string theory. And I should say quantum field theory begins to look a lot more like consciousness because of its field-like nature. And again, I don't want to say consciousness is quantum mechanics, just like I don't want to say consciousness isn't neuron firings. Consciousness is something else. Well, it's not something else. It's part of and brought about by all of those processes in this sort of up and down causation. But yeah, it's field-like. Now what's fascinating, again, is that we are this. And I think with supervenience and downward causation, it's a two-way street. So not only does energy momentum fluctuating in quantum fields gather up and decohere and become atoms, and atoms become molecules, which become cells, which become organs, which become neurons, which becomes, and then there's the hard problem again, consciousness or mind, and then you have psychology and mental states and consciousness on the top. So going from that way is supervenience. So supervenience is from the bottom up, how it produces consciousness, and downward causation is from the top down. So, and it goes both ways because my consciousness moves my body about. So supervenience and downward causation goes both ways, up and down, and all of those processes come about to produce your consciousness, while your consciousness moves down and moves your body about and does other things. But the truth is, in the whole thing, from consciousness down to quantum fields, or even lower if there is such a thing, string theory, whatever, all of this is smushed together as one thing. That's the kind of neat thing, that it's all one thing. Because you can claim to be all of that all you want, and you know that you're atoms, cells, consciousness, psychology. We're incredibly complex beings. So it's pretty fascinating. Anyways, I just wanted to make this video to kind of point to where I want to talk about when I want to get to actually talking about quantum field theory, which is coming up, by the way. So anyways, if you like this video, hit the subscribe button, or maybe like it too. That's nice. Thanks for watching.